On October 5, 2003, a pair of severed human legs were found in a garbage bin at an apartment complex at 1600 Hilton Head Court in Rancho San Diego. No other body parts were found at the scene. A coroner determined that the legs belonged to a woman who had been a victim of a homicide. However, the coroner could not determine the cause of death. Police could not find anything at the crime scene which could help identify the victim. They tried everything, but they were unable to identify her, so the case soon grew cold. In 2020, police decided to reopen the case. Her DNA was sent to the lab, and a DNA profile was created and uploaded to the genealogy databases available. Soon, her DNA matched a distant relative. The investigators then built a family tree to find a common ancestor between the victim and the relative. However, building the family tree proved challenging, as in this case, the family tree had to go back to the 1800s in order to find a match. Investigators contacted several family members to provide DNA samples to help confirm the victim's identity, and 6 months later, she was finally identified as Lori Diane Potter. During their investigation into Lori's life, police found that in 2003, Lori was 54 years old and living in Temecula and married to a Jack Dennis Potter. Investigators soon found substantial and they say conclusive evidence, which has not been shared with the media, that Lori's husband, Jack, murdered her. Lori was never reported missing to the police in the last 17 years, not even by her own husband. Her family and friends believed that Lori left her husband and her family thought she was living somewhere else. They never contacted police to inquire about her whereabouts. Authorities believe Lori was killed 1 to 2 days before her body was found. On May 12, 2021, Jack Potter was finally arrested and charged with Lori's murder. No details have been released regarding his motive. On May 20, 2021, he pleaded not guilty to a murder charge and is now awaiting trial. On July 5, 1966, a couple checked into Roper's Hotel in Pecos, Reeves County, Texas. They checked in using the names Mr. and Mrs. Russell Batoon. About 3 hours later, a maid heard screams coming from the swimming pool. She went to check and found Miss Batoon lying face down at the bottom of the swimming pool. The maid immediately called the hotel manager, who called the ambulance and notified police. Meanwhile, the staff pulled her out of the swimming pool and performed emergency CPR. An employee went to Miss Batoon's room and found her husband fast asleep. He woke him up and told him about the incident. By that time, his wife was taken to Reeves Memorial Hospital. However, she was pronounced dead upon her arrival. The husband packed up their belongings at the hotel and asked the receptionist for his registration card, saying that he was going to the hospital and that he needed it to confirm his identity to the police as they were not from the area. The husband then got into his dark-colored sedan and drove away, never to be seen again. The man was described as slim, having a blonde crew cut and looking about 10 years older than his wife. The police tried searching for the man, but they were only able to find one man by the name of Russell Batoon, and he was a Marine stationed at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina at the time. The police believed the couple had used a fake name to check into the hotel. The police searched their hotel room but could not find anything, as the man seemed to have taken all of their belongings with him, along with any potential information that could help identify the couple. An autopsy revealed that the woman had a red, quarter-sized abrasion above her left cheekbone. However, it is unclear if the abrasion was there before her body was taken out of the pool, or if it occurred during her attempted rescue while she was being taken out. There was no other sign of foul play, and her death was ruled an accidental drowning. It appeared she was alone when she drowned. The woman was estimated to be between the ages of 17 and 20 years old. She was 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighed 130 pounds. She had long brown hair, brown eyes, and had an olive complexion. The coroner also found 2 words written on the sole of her right foot with a ballpoint pen, the word Joe and the word lean. Police tried everything to find the woman's identity. Her case was published in the newspaper, and the police received several tips, but none were fruitful. Many local residents raised funds for the woman's funeral, and the funeral director donated a casket. She was buried at the Fairview Cemetery with a headstone which read, "Unknown Girl, Drowned." In 2014, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, received an email from a tipster which read, quote, "There is an unidentified girl buried in Fairfield Cemetery in Pecos, Texas. She isn't on Doe Network or NamUs or anywhere, and I was wondering if she could be added." The woman, who now was referred to as the Pecos County Jane Doe's details, was then manually entered into the NamUs database. In 2019, the regional director of NamUs was going through the Pecos County Jane Doe entry list when he realized that even though her death certificate said she was 19 years old at the time of her death, it was possible that the Pecos County Jane Doe was actually a minor. With this new revelation, her body was exhumed and her DNA was extracted. Her DNA was entered into CODIS, but no matches could be found. Then, in 2020, Ortham Labs reached out to Pecos Police Department to help them identify the Pecos County Jane Doe using genetic genealogy. Ortham Labs then created a DNA profile and submitted it to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. In 2021, the Family Tree DNA Registry was able to find a potential match to 3 siblings living in Texas. The investigators then traced the family tree to possible family members. The police then met with a family member and asked if she had a missing person in her family. She cried and told investigators that her younger sister had gone missing in 1966, and she had been looking for her ever since. The investigators took a DNA sample from her, and in January of 2021, after 55 years, Pecos County Jane Doe was finally given a name. She was identified as Jolene Hemme. Jolene Hemme grew up in Salina, Kansas. She was the 9th of 15 children born to Richard and Alverda Hemme. In 1966, Jolene was 17 years old and was working at a drive-in diner. In the summer of 1966, Jolene started dating an older man. Her siblings didn't remember his name, but that he was much older than Jolene, probably by a decade or so. Her siblings did not like him as he treated Jolene poorly. Her siblings told investigators that on July 1st, 1966, Jolene mysteriously vanished. She didn't pick up her weekend paycheck the next day, and her family reported her missing. It was found that her boyfriend was also missing, and police believed that she ran away with her boyfriend and would probably return soon. The family put up flyers and bulletins all over Kansas City. On July 3rd, one of her sisters received a postcard from Jolene. It read simply, quote, "Jolene, well, I got lost. See you in a couple weeks. Maybe. Joe." Her family does not believe that it was Jolene's handwriting, and moreover, no one in the family called her Joe. Her siblings believe the unknown man had something to do with her death, as Jolene did not know how to swim and would have never gotten in the pool alone. It is unclear if the unknown man is involved in her death, but police would like to speak with him. Jolene's death certificate has been changed to include her name, and her family is hoping to get her remains moved to Kansas, where she can be properly buried alongside her parents. In 1977, a couple, Mr. and Mrs. McLeod, owned a farm just outside of Tofield, Canada. The farm had been abandoned for a few years, but on the 13th of April, 1977, the couple decided to return to their farm to retrieve a pump from their septic tank. Upon removing the lid from the septic tank, the couple was horrified to find a human foot sticking out of the murky water. They immediately called police. The septic tank was drained, revealing a decomposing body. The body had been wrapped in a yellow bedsheet and tied up with a nylon rope. Initially, due to the decomposition, the police were unable to identify even the gender of the victim. The victim was fully clothed, wearing a blue Levi's shirt with snap buttons, a gray t-shirt, blue jeans, and shoes. An autopsy revealed the victim was male and of Caucasian or Native American descent. He was estimated to be around 28 years old. The man had been severely tortured before being murdered and his body dumped. He had been tied up and severely beaten. He had burn marks all over his body, suggesting that he had been burned with a butane blowtorch or cigarettes. One of the reasons why investigators were unable to determine his gender initially was because he had been sexually mutilated with possibly farm shears. He was then shot in the head and chest. It is believed the man had been in the tank for a few months, up to a year before being discovered. It was also found that his body had been covered with calcium oxide, a chemical compound also known as quicklime, in order to accelerate the rate of decomposition. However, the killer or killers didn't realize that when mixed with water, quicklime actually does the opposite. Quicklime mixed with water causes the body to dry out, and it preserves it for far longer than it would have on its own. Investigators were unable to find anything at the crime scene to identify the victim. The victim was nicknamed Septic Tank Sam, and police believed the killer had been a local or someone who knew the area well, as they would have had to have sufficient knowledge about the farm being abandoned, which would help them conceal the body for a longer amount of time. The police did their very best to identify the man. They distributed his dental records to over 800 dentists and published them in a Canadian dental magazine in hopes of finding any leads, but to no avail. The man was buried in an unmarked grave in Edmonton. In 1979, his body was exhumed and a DNA sample was taken. It was found that the man was at least 35 years old and was probably of Aboriginal heritage. It was also found that the man had suffered serious illness as a toddler, which left a mark on his teeth and his bones. It was believed he was a migrant worker passing through Alberta when he was brutally murdered. A 3D rendering of his face was created and published in various newspapers. However, the police were still unable to find any leads, and the case again grew cold and stayed that way for more than 40 years. In 2017, the Alberta RCMP Missing Persons Unit launched a national DNA program aimed at giving a name to unidentified remains using DNA collected from those who've reported a missing person in their family. In 2019, the Alberta RCMP sent the DNA sample to the new database, but to no avail. In 2020, the Alberta RCMP Missing Persons Unit sent the victim's DNA sample, this time to Ortham Labs, located in Texas. Ortham Labs was able to create a DNA profile, and it was entered into genealogy databases throughout the continent. On June 29, 2021, the body known as Septic Tank Sam was positively identified as Gordon Edwin Sanderson after 44 years. It was found that Gordon had had a hard life. As a 9-year-old, Gordon was taken from his Indigenous parents and placed in foster care during what was known as the 60s Scoop. The 60s Scoop was a widespread practice in which Aboriginal children were taken from their families and placed in the so-called care of the Canadian child welfare system. This racist, improperly funded, and poorly monitored program took otherwise healthy and happy children and made them wards of the government. As a result, Gordon struggled with addiction and had had multiple run-ins with police. At the time of his death, Gordon was 25 years old and living in Edmonton. He was on his way to visit his brother in Calgary, Alberta, when he was murdered. He was reported missing by his sister after he failed to arrive at his brother's house. However, his sister never received any updates about his disappearance. Police believe Gordon was killed by someone who knew him, possibly someone who was involved in various criminal acts in Edmonton. Police are now hoping to find anyone who may have spoken to Gordon before his death or may possibly have information regarding his brutal murder.